That's
All
a
right,
good
guys. I figure
good
we
plan.
get started here. We got a decent number of folks on and starting, this new time. So, just kind of quick agenda, welcome, and then go over 2024 Golden Packet, talk a little bit about, our usual Kenwood alternative discussion. And then John, WB2OSZ, agreed to do a presentation update on Direwolf 1.7, and then had a few other topics I thought we would go over when John was finished with his presentation. Um, Sounds like a lot of days, but ATGP 24 is 221 days away, so we're just a little over 6 months away. It feels like the 20 ATGP 23 was just like a few weeks ago. Um, the theme this year is no surprises. So, which is, if you guys know Radiohead's a great song. I think that there's always some factors that we inevitably run into. And I think arguably this past year, for the most part, we were better prepared than usual, but we did have some surprises that I think a lot of us would agree that, had they not been surprises and we've been able to account for them, we would have had a greater degree of success. I think one thing I didn't put on the slide was, the whole 1200 versus 9600 thing. And I think, maybe this year we forego 1200 and just go straight to 96 because of how well it did this past year. Um, the sites, we added a couple of sites this past year, and we modified a site. I think, just as a group, we should maybe just spend some time in a future call going over what sites we're going to include this year. If we're going to add any more, we're going to change things at all. We're going to keep them the way that we did them for 23. Um, Coverage wise, I would like to see if we can get more folks involved at each of the sites so we have more redundancy. Something that had come up after this past summer's event was this idea of having a team and then somebody who's effectively like a captain of the team, so that there's more coordination within each of the sites or the groups that are managing the sites. And I think if we have a way of identifying any clubs that are within the vicinity of each of the sites, that we could approach them and see if they have any interest in participating in the event, because that would help drive more attendance to each of the sites. And then, the team concept with captains becomes maybe a little bit easier. Because I know some places we really only have one or two people, and other places we have more, but I think just given the fact that we inevitably have like 48, 72 hours before the event, things come up and we have to make some last minute changes. And so anything we can do to compensate, I think would be good. Something I did not do this past year, which I had done the year before, it worked out really nicely, was getting an inventory from everybody of what equipment that they were bringing. And kind of along the lines of surprises, there were a couple of sites that had brought gear that we just didn't know that they were going to be operating, which kind of took us by surprise. And, just would have been nice to know about it. I think we all agree to the more testing that we can do before the event, the better. And so, the pre-event testing, we're really going to put a heavy emphasis on that this year. And I've the past 2, 3 years, I have built a lot of like templates to make things easier for organization to the point where not like reinventing the wheel every year, but I would really love to have somebody help with kind of the logistics and coordination of the event this year. So maybe, in another month or two, if anybody's interested in helping assist me with coordinating this year's event, I would not turn that away by any means. Um, and past couple of years, thanks to Don and friends, we've introduced an alternative for the Kenwood D710s. I think that we can still look at using the APRS appliance again, but I've also been talking with John Tarbox about maybe we look at using something else this year. maybe more flexibility around what we've been doing. But I think, the general consensus from the postmortem feedback, all the surveys that came back, was everybody said, we have to have a display on the device, because people just didn't feel like they could understand what the device was doing. And so whatever we choose for this year has got to have a display. Direwolf 1.7, which John Langner is going to go over tonight, is a requirement, and includes the capabilities we need for Golden Packet. GPS is nice to have, but not necessary. Some just kind of preliminary list of options. So Jason, K4APR, he's been working on building like an embedded device. It's not based on a Raspberry Pi. It's a custom hardware that will have a display on it. DigiPi is a great distribution, intended for Raspberry Pi. What is it? The mini one. Lynn, you have your hand raised, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in a quick question. I'm not sure Jason's device does 9600 baud. You might want to make a
Yeah, I
note
don't know either. Yeah,
to ask him that.
yeah. That was just something I wanted to throw on here, just kind of food for
Yeah,
thought.
yeah.
Uh,
And I think you're thinking the Pi Zero 2W.
that's the one. Yes, sorry, just having a little bit of a brain lapse there. Um, but yeah, so DigiPi is a great distribution. It does a lot more than just APRS, but it was also a piece of cake to load the two config files in for Direwolf and to hide all the other menu options that aren't related. Has some built-in support for a small OLED display out of the box, so to speak. Supports Wi-Fi and Bluetooth already. And Craig just shipped version 1.8, which includes Direwolf 1.7, so there's no need to adapt it. Or, we can look at using the APRS appliance again. So just some things to think about, but I do think that we should have some sort of a committee. Doesn't have to be a ton of people. It could be, 1, 2, 3 people that I think we need at least 2 for it to be a committee, but some folks that are just focused on collecting what our requirements are and what options are available and helping us select something for this year's event.
Yeah, I think that'd
Lynn,
be
go ahead.
great. Yeah. Don, you actually had a display on your appliance, right?
Yes, basically any of the classic APRS applications that connect over a KISS interface can be connected to the appliance. I ran it in my car using a laptop, an APRS IS32.
Okay.
You can use APRS FI on an iPhone, or you can use APRS Droid on a Android phone.
Android phone, yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so it is possible to get the APRS appliance can do that. It's just that a lot of us didn't bother trying to hook one up in advance.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Direwolf is going to support that KISS connection, right? So, any other questions or comments on this?
Yeah, Jeff, one thought I had is to, once you get everybody, the captain of each station kind of designated, and this is kind of simplistic, but I thought it might be good for everybody to present, well ahead of time, kind of not only plan A, but plan B.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it seems like, it's some little silly thing goes wrong and the whole thing goes down,
Yeah, absolutely. And I should have, sorry, I kind of skipped ahead kind of quickly, but just see if anybody had any questions or comments on the HEGP 24 event in general.
I was going to add one more thing to consider for a device would be the microsat device. I'm experimenting with that, and I've been quite pleased, and it allegedly supports 9600, although that's beta at the moment. I'm getting ready to test that thoroughly for other purposes. Just another device. Should all be compatible ultimately, but yes, the devil's in the details.
Sure.
Yeah. The trick with the WXSat is whether or not it supports UI flood or if it only supports UI trace digipeating.
Oh, yeah.
Roger that.
Yeah, can you let us know on that when you do your testing, John?
Sure. Yeah. I'll get with Lynn and again, those little nooks and crannies of APRS details that are deep down in Berninga's mind are things that are tough for me to
Yeah,
understand.
we've
So,
got some pretty unique requirements for this event.
but I mean, ultimately, if we can do like the same guide that you've produced before, I loved that last time. I didn't have to really think it through. I just wandered through it. It's all set up. This is the 710, and that was one less thing I had to worry about. So we can do
Awesome.
that with microsat and find a way to use it. We'll see what happens.
Beautiful.
But I'm still bringing in Kenwood.
Yeah, wherever possible. Absolutely.
There's a
Jeff.
guy up in Chattanooga who uses that uses the microsat all the time, and he might be a good resource if you want to if you have any questions or anything. I'm happy to put you in touch with him.
Sure.
I think I
Jeff.
heard somebody else trying to get in there. Yeah.
Yeah, this year, if I'm invited to do Sugarloaf again, I'm going to plan on carrying just one data radio instead of two like last year. I carried the 208 and the 710, but I think the 710 should be good enough for the to run an appliance and classic version, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Save a little
absolutely.
weight.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, it's like a little over 6 months, but with just how quickly time is flying by, I mean, after this, we have 5 more knowledge share events. And then, typically in June, we do kind of the more admin help desk meetings before the event. So 5 meetings isn't really all that many. And then, we'll figure out what we're going to do this year for the admin help desk calls. But those seem to have worked out nicely the past couple of years, at least, especially the ones really close to the event. We had really, really good attendance for those.
Can I interject?
Yeah,
You said
absolutely.
if you're invited to Sugarloaf, consider yourself invited.
Yeah, if you want to do it, it's you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a matter of invite, it's just whoever wants to sign up. So it's open.
Good to hear.
Yeah, so it's funny, this still says March. I guess I missed this slide here. I reused the template from another let's see here. Yeah, so sorry about that. That's what you get for building your slide deck 30 minutes before the call. Yeah, so John Tarbox and I, we've been trying to start planning these calls out a little further in advance. And so I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we reached out to John, WB2OSZ, to see if he would be kind enough to do a presentation on Direwolf 1.7. So I don't know, most of you folks who are part of Golden Packet Group may already know John. For those that aren't, John kindly joined the Golden Packet Group a couple of years ago. Really excited to have him be a regular participant in our monthly events and on. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to him if you're ready to go.
Okay, let me try to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
At the bottom, there's something that says share screen. Is there an option to share just a single window?
Yeah, so when you do that, it'll pop up another little window and it'll ask you what in particular you want to share, if you want to share your whole desktop or just an individual application.
Okay, here we go. Can we see that?
Yes. It was initially it was cropped, but that looks better now.
Okay. Yeah, I just had to move it to the middle. Alrighty. Okay, you already know the topic. Direwolf 1.7 was released a few weeks ago, and here we have a quick overview of most of the changes. I got really ambitious about writing a lot of documentation. First, there was I wrote about digipeters and iGates in great detail. I've been writing a radio interface guide that explains how to connect the radio to a computer. Should be trivial, but there's just so many possibilities, and so many people seem to run into strange problems. So I've tried to record all of it in one place. Internal packet routing is how explains the different ways that packets can go between or from different sources to different destinations, and I'll get into that more later. And another thing I've been writing is a document explaining how to understand APRS packets. Usually if someone asks about some obscure packets, someone says, go look at the protocol spec, but I mean, that's not practical for most people. So can anyone, other than Lynn, of course, tell me what this packet means?
That's a message type packet with the brace message type packet.
No, the brace will appear in third packet. But in this case, it appears as part of the MIC-E format. And then you got all this obscure stuff here. So if you want to know what this means, you'll have to read my new document.
Where is your new document?
It's in the secondary document directory.
In
Okay,
the GitHub repository.
Well, the GitHub will tell you where the additional documentation is.
Okay.
So another exciting feature is DNS service discovery. So when using some client application that wants to talk to a TNC, if you go over a network, you need to know the host address and the TCP port to connect to. But now Direwolf advertises this information so that if you have, I'm going to turn my picture off. You don't need to see what I look like. I don't know. I don't see how to get rid of it.
You may have to stop sharing momentarily to see it, or it could be at the toolbar at the top.
So here we have an example over here. This is the APRS.phi iOS application. And so when you say connect to a TNC, it shows you a list of what's available, so you don't have to know what's out there. The demodulator. Is
that using the Avahi daemon?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So yeah, and you said Linux and Mac only, but I think, interestingly enough, you have iTunes installed on a Windows machine. It installs support for that daemon.
Yeah, in theory, it should work on Windows, but if people start screaming, I'll look into it. Or maybe someone wants to figure it out and send me a pull request. Okay, I rewrote the AFSK demodulator. I've learned a lot since I did this the first time, so it's a lot simpler now. And it still uses the same principle of having filters for the two audio tones. It takes the amplitudes and then compares to see which one's stronger. I also wrote a new demodulator. So rather than having two filters, it now acts like an FM discriminator, and it generates a signal proportional to the input frequency. And you can do experimentation by selecting one or both of the demodulators on the command line. And the new demodulator B has pretty much the same performance when the two-tone amplitudes are not much different, but when there's a big imbalance, it doesn't do quite as well.
Was that like a complete rewrite or?
Well, I did a rewrite of the first AFSK demodulator to make it a lot simpler and more efficient. But then I did a completely new independent one using a new technique, just for fun.
So was it better? I mean, do you have like a recorded set that you can test, you know, to see if it decodes more stuff?
It's essentially the same.
Okay.
I used the
TNC test suite, right?
Okay, I use the TNC test CD for most of my testing. Yeah. And it's pretty close. So I've not done a lot of testing with it yet. I did just for fun. One day I said, well, I've been using this demodulator for so long. Why don't I throw a different kind in there, just you know, see what it does. But it's there if you want to experiment with it, and you can use one at a time, or on the last line, you can run both at the same time.
But the default is the old one, is that right?
Yeah, the old style. It was rewritten with the old style.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're all familiar with these little gadgets. And if it has a C-Media chip, there's some extra I/O pins in there that you can use for PTT. So that was originally just for Linux, but 1.7 adds limited support for Windows. By limited, I mean it cannot automatically match up the audio and the PTT devices. If you have more than one device, you'd have to figure that out manually. And that's because the UDEV library is only on Linux. Now here's another interesting little gadget. I don't know if any of you have seen this before. It's called the all-in-one cable. Has anyone seen that before? Okay.
Yeah. It's for the Kenwood Baofeng setup.
Yeah. So it's a little circuit board, and there's two. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
That's interesting. It got big. Got real big temporarily. Huh. So there are two plugs on it that will fit into, you know, most Chinese radios using the Kenwood standard. And it does not have a sound chip on it. What it does have is it has a microcontroller that emulates a USB sound chip. And at the same time, it also emulates a USB to serial converter, so you can use the same device for programming the radio. So I thought that was kind of cute, though it looks a little precarious hanging off on the side like that. Okay, from time to time, somebody gets confused because his system is receiving his own transmissions, and that's caused by pretty bad audio crosstalk between transmit and receive. It doesn't cause a problem, but it's visually confusing when people see this. So I've now modified it so that when transmitting on a particular channel, the audio or the receive audio is now muted. Something I probably should have done in the first place, but it finally got in. I've added a new protocol called IL. Well, it's improved layer 2 protocol. This was originally implemented in the Nino TNC. It can be used to send AX25 information with forward error correction. So compared to FX25, it is less overhead for the forward error correction. It can handle longer packets up to 1K bytes, but negatives, it has less powerful forward error correction, and it's not interoperable with AX.25 on the air. So Direwolf contains, various utilities for testing and other purposes. And one of them is called Gen Packets. And this will generate packets that can be used for testing. So one option adds increasing amounts of random noise, so I can test how well a TNC can tolerate the distortion of a signal. I added a new feature which would generate packets at variable speeds rather than being the ideal value. So here, in this case, I say variable speed 5, and that means generate packets starting at 5% slower than normal. And then at increments of 0.1%, it goes up to 5% faster than the ideal speed. This is just to see how well TNCs will tolerate signals that don't have precise timing. And I found that Direwolf will receive like 80 or 90% of these. So it's something like 3 to 4% slower and faster than the ideal. So that would be an interesting experiment to see how other TNCs deal with timing that's a little bit off on the transmitting end.
Yeah, have you done any testing with other microcontroller driven devices to see how close they are to the proper bit timings?
Yeah, I'll tell you what led up to this. We're doing some troubleshooting with some hams in Australia using the Anytone. Was it I don't know, something
That was the 878.
878.
Whatever. And they would receive packets from all other stations, but they would not receive any packets from some stations that we learned were using the TNCX. And someone sent me a recording and it looked perfectly good, and I couldn't figure out anything. So then I looked at the TNCX code and I saw that it was using a timing loop for the bit timing rather than a hardware timer. So I'm wondering if it might have been off a little bit. So the idea was that I was going to write a utility that would measure measure the baud rate of incoming packets. That would be part of it, which I haven't done yet, so that we could look at different signals and see if they're at the ideal speed or not. And then this part of it will generate packets with different baud rates, varying a little above or below the ideal. And then I was going to feed this into different TNCs, see how tolerant they were of timing errors. So this is just an incomplete project.
I had a feeling it kind of springboarded off of something like that. I'm not surprised that's where it springboarded from.
Right, so it is, well, if I had infinite amount of time, I would take this recording and feed it into a whole bunch of different TNCs and radios and see how tolerant they were of timing that was just a hair off. But I only have a finite amount of time, and I've since gotten distracted by other things. Okay, so next screen. How come it's not going to next screen?
It is slowly.
Yeah, I don't know. Down arrow used to go a whole page. Now it's just okay.
It's a nice effect.
Yeah. So this page is just a little background or introduction so you can understand what's going on in the next page. So over here, we have the different radio channels. So you might have several radios in internal modems, which I call channels 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And when a packet is received on one of those radios, it then is sent to all of the attached clients, both on the KISS and the AGW protocol. And the client knows which radio it came from because there's a small field in the packet. Well, or I guess the packet, not APRS packet, but the packet that's sent from either KISS or AGW protocol. So new feature. It's getting warm in here. Excuse me if I take off one of my sweatshirts. Okay. And I'm too cold. So there's a new feature that allows the client applications to talk directly to APRSIS. So this is APRSIS up here in the cloud. And concurrently with the iGate running to multiple radio channels, it can now also communicate directly to a client application on a given channel. And the way you do this is in the configuration file, you define a virtual channel which will be mapped to the APRSIS. In this case, I picked 15. So when a client application sends a packet like this to Direwolf, and it sends it to channel 15, there is no radio channel 15, it sends it to APRSIS. So this is a message, and it's going to the WHOIS server, and the message content is a call sign. So then the WHOIS server or service responds with first there's an acknowledgement. So from WHOIS, it sends it to my station name with an acknowledgement that it was received. And then next, it responds. I don't know if you can see my cursor. So we get a message from WHOIS going to my station. And then the message content is C for club. I think it's I for individual. And then there's the name and then the location. Does that make sense?
It does. Do you actually wrap it in a third-party packet to hand back to the application as well?
Yeah. Now the reason for that is, if you notice here in the response, the message sender is who-is. That won't fit into an on-air AX.25 packet. Okay, which is
And
the same
therefore won't
format.
fit in a KISS either.
Right.
It won't fit in a KISS packet either because that is AX25.
Exactly. So I just put a little dummy third-party packet in front of it, so it could handle that case. So the application would have to know to strip off the third-party packet header, which they should do anyhow.
Very, very, very cute. I like that. Can I steal it?
I think, yeah, I question, how do you direct the client apps to channel 15, I guess? I mean, is that like a reserve channel? And then how do you actually direct that client to it?
Okay, the KISS packet format has a 4-byte field for the channel number, so it can be anywhere from 0 to 15. So in this case, I decided I would use channel 15, and in the Direwolf configuration, I put iChannel 15. So that means anything that comes from APRSIS gets sent to the client applications with a source of channel 15. That makes sense so far?
Yep. Okay.
Okay. And then anything that goes from a client application to Direwolf, normally it would go out of radio, but if it has this channel number that was specified, it gets sent to APRSIS.
Okay.
So
Got
that
it.
way, I'm able to write scripts which would, well, could do anything. I mean, I can talk to APR services without going over the air, or I could write my own APRS service.
Okay. That's really cool.
Okay, I've already started on 1.8. Everything I've discussed here is, everything here is in the dev branch. So the first thing I did was a new way of handling the GPIO pins for PTT on single board computers. So the way you specify a GPIO pin for push to talk is you say PTT, GPIO, and then a number. Now behind the scenes, the GPIO is accessed through a device node. So there are, to start off, there are no device nodes for pin number 24. So what you have to do is write the string 24 to the sys class GPIO export. And then new device nodes are created. And there's one called direction where you can specify input or output. Value is state. I mean, so you can read and write 1 or 0. Edge allows you to generate interrupts, and active low just inverts the value.
John, this may or may not affect you, but you know, I got a couple of friends that are working on the Pi-Star hotspot MMDVM interface that talks to GPIO, and I guess with the Raspberry Pi 5 and the new Raspberry Pi OS bookworm, it looks like the Raspberry Pi Foundation has changed a lot of the ways that the OS interacts with the GPIO interface. They're pretty dramatic changes with the 5 that differ with all previous versions. So
exactly. This has
Yeah.
been sitting on the back burner for a long time. Because, well, let's get on to the new way. Wrong way.
Yeah, if you don't patch your Raspberry Pi OS kernel, that will still work. But if you apply an errata kernel, it stops working. The sys file system GPI stuff.
Oh, so it is possible then to make use of the previous behavior.
Well, there's an entirely new way of accessing the GPIO bits. So the new way is using this GPIO daemon. And you have to go through some extra steps of first you have to install the daemon, and you have to install a library for talking to it. And then behind the scenes, it just uses library calls. And then in the Direwolf configuration file, instead of GPIO, it's GPIO-D for daemon. And there's an additional requirement of having to put the chip number in there besides the pin number. And there's a new.
This means your configuration file isn't portable among Raspberry Pis anymore, right? So it's Will this work on the old Raspberry Pi and the 5, you think?
The same executable, okay, the same executable will work with both. Well, assuming you've built it with support for this. But
So GPIOD would know the difference, yeah, because the GPIO chip 0 stuff, because what they're doing with Raspberry Pi 5 is they have multiple controllers for GPIO. That's why you have to specify which chip. Old Raspberry Pis didn't have that. You could just say a pin number and that was enough. So maybe GPIOD abstracts that enough. What I'm getting at is I want to have one configuration file that works on every Raspberry Pi ever made, right? That would be something to confirm here.
maybe we could have a third choice that would automatically pick whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, there might not be a problem. I'm just saying that's something I want to test out. This is cool
Right.
though. I'm glad you went with GPIOD because yeah, that's the old stuff's gone.
Well, the same executable will, again, the same Direwolf executable will be able to handle both of these. And like, I just have an RPI3, and in the same configuration file, I can use both forms for different lines. So I know what you want is you want something that would test to see if the daemon form is available, and if so, use that, and if not, fall back to the old way. And I'm open to suggestions because I'm not fond of this.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yeah, I don't want to have to dynamically generate a conf file depending on what hardware I'm running on, right? Be nice to just use one config file for all Pis, but yeah, well, maybe there's not a problem. I'll test this out.
So I do welcome suggestions to make this easier to use. And there's this new application called GPI Info that shows you the names of the GPIO chips and the lines available. Now on the RPI3, GPIO chip 0 has the normal user controllable pins. I don't have a 5, but if it turned out that it also had GPIO chip 0, maybe I could make that a default and make it optional here.
And the 5 has GPIO chips 0 through 5 enumerated in the dev file system, and each pin might be on a different controller. You don't know. Well, I mean, you know what GPIO info, but I was hoping GPIOD would get rid of that, having to worry about that, right? Because GPIO 0 is a backend that deals with all this, so you don't have to think about it. You just say pin 24, and it figures out which GPIO chip it's on. But the CPU overhead is prohibitive to use GPIO 0 backend. GPIOD is the right way to go for a C program at what you're doing, but it just means the user has to be aware of all this.
Yeah, it should almost abstract it from the user because, I mean, they're going to have a nightmare with backward compatibility.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure they've given some thought to it, but it seems like they want to abandon the old way as soon as possible from what I was reading.
Yeah, Ubuntu already dropped this, and then yeah, Bookworm is awful. It's not ready yet. It's not. It's not for the average user. I don't think. Not yet. Anyways, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
I mean, this has been in the queue for a long time, but the first time I tried it, a couple of releases back, it didn't work on the Raspberry Pi, so it just went back on the shelf. And now someone reported that the Raspberry 5 Pi didn't support the old methods, so I had to drag this out very quickly. But
that was me, I think. Yeah.
So yeah, if we could have a way that would just magically work. We can take that up offline. I would like to have something that would automatically choose whatever happens to be available, and then maybe have an option to force one way or the other.
Or like Jeff says, have that abstraction be somewhere else besides the user. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll continue. So in the Direwolf configuration file, when generating a position beacon, when you specify an altitude, it happens to be in units of meters. I did that for the convenience of like 96% of the world that uses meters. And then, of course, when it goes into the APRS packet, it gets converted to feet. And this kind of tripped me up because I was trying to generate some test packets, and I put in 123. I was expecting 123 feet out, and it was, I don't know, whatever it was, 400 or something. Meters got changed to feet. So I went in and added a feature that you can now put common unit names after the number. So, you know, if 100 defaults to meters, I can do 100 feet, 1.2 mile, or whatever. Okay, here's an interesting one. So somebody recently contacted me and asked about negative altitudes, because there's a surprising number of places around the world where the land is very far below median sea level. Some of the more obvious ones are like New Orleans or the Netherlands, and which are fairly small, but the shore of the Dead Sea is like minus 1,400 feet. So I went back to the protocol spec, and it only lists, you know, A equals 6 digits. And I couldn't find any references in any of the notes since then. I did a little experimenting, generated, handcrafted a packet with a negative altitude of a negative sign and 5 digits. And I put some other digits behind there to see if they'd be included. How come my cursor keeps getting bigger and smaller?
Yeah, that's a Mac OS feature. When you wiggle the mouse around, it gets bigger.
That's fun. Oh yeah, I guess that's useful. Yeah, if it's too small, you don't know where it is. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So I put some other numbers after this just to see if it would work, and if it worked, if it would gather up 5 or 6 digits. And I found out that both APRS.FI and Zaster already recognized the negative altitudes with a negative sign and 5 digits. And again, I intentionally put more digits after that, and they were considered part of the comment. And I mentioned this to several APRS developers, and 2 have since changed their code to recognize negative altitudes. Not in the spec, but there's already precedent where a couple other applications recognize it.
When you first brought that slide up, I thought it said negative attitude. So
Is it? Yeah.
no.
Negative altitude, yeah. And let's see, we're getting near the end. Oh yeah, we are at the end. Okay, so that's where we are.
That's great, John. The 1.8 preview is a surprise. So it seems like, I mean, you made changes in the dev branch for 1.7 specific for the golden packet, but it seems like you've done a lot more since then. So that's phenomenal. Well,
Yeah,
I guess,
I
mean,
have lots of other ideas, but I don't want to talk about them because priorities shift, and
sure.
sometimes I start on things and never finish them.
Yeah, totally. Anybody have any questions or comments for John?
Is there anything ATGP specific that you've worked on in the newest version?
Yeah, there is a DigiPi option. that would leave only the most recent digipeater in the path. Because with AGTP, we're using like 15 digipeaters along the path, 15 digipeaters along the path, but there's only room for 8 in the packet. So if you tried adding all of the addresses in there, you'd run out of room. So at the request of some people, I modified it to match the, I think it was called the UI something. I made it mimic the behavior of old TNCs, where it would only leave the last digipeater in there and drop all the earlier ones, so it would not overflow the field.
This is
Okay,
sort of
it's
like
all done.
selecting no ID or ID in UI Digi, maybe?
Actually, the ID versus no ID governs whether the digipeating station puts its own call sign in the path at all. UI flood says get rid of everything prior to me and only put me in. UI trace is what we're used to, where it counts down the wide end ends and inserts itself. So yeah, ID no ID is kind of related, but it's actually the UI flood versus UI trace from the KPC3 specs.
Okay, thank you.
John, I'm gonna take the screen sharing back from you here.
Excellent presentation, John. Thank you so much for the update.
Yes, thank you, John.
Yeah, this is great.
Pleasure.
So I wanted to try and keep time, just given that we're starting later. So I had a couple other things that I just wanted to go over real quick and then open it up for anybody who wants to stay a little bit later. But 2 years ago, I had a logo commissioned for the event, and the company that built the logo or designed it, they were kind enough to donate it in or give us a copy of it in Adobe Illustrator format. And I wanted the 2022 out of the file so that we could use it for future events. But I know some folks weren't really all that thrilled with the logo as it is today. So, totally up for if we get a new logo developed, not specifically for this event, but just for the group overall. And whether or not we get shirts again for this coming summer's event. I think a few folks had actually suggested that we have like a year-round storefront, and there are companies that would do that for us, where people could order, shirts, mugs, mouse pads, whatever they want to. And it's we're not obviously not a club, we're a group, but it couldn't hurt to have some money to support some of the things that we do. And it's just something that I'd been thinking about and just wanted to throw it out there. We don't necessarily need to have any answers for it tonight, but just kind of more or less food for thought. But I think people like the shirts. I think the biggest problem was the window for ordering them was really tight before the event, and there were some people who wanted to order them that were unable to. And I want to make sure that if we do it again, to have a much longer time frame, so people can get orders in much earlier. But we need to start thinking about that, like in January, February timeframe, if we're going to do something this year. There is both a website and a wiki for the event. Web development is not my forte. I did get started. I think I spent more time building out the wiki than the website, but I haven't touched it in quite some time. If there's anybody who has any web development or even just kind of ideas about content, I'd love to get back on that again and kind of freshen things up. So if anybody's interested, please reach out to me. Just going forward, obviously we've been starting at 7 p.m., but just the new time, there's a couple of folks that just couldn't make the 7 o'clock start time. So going forward, these will start at 7:30. I had gotten some negative feedback from folks that it took me a long time to upload the recordings after the event. Just in terms of setting expectations. So I don't just take the raw recording and go and upload it afterwards. I do take some time to edit them, to take some of the banter off the beginning and the end, and if there's anything in the middle that needs to be tweaked or whatever. And unfortunately, that does take some time, and I work like 10, 12-hour days every day. Sometimes I'm just tired and don't want to sit in front of the computer afterwards. But, you know, I'm committing at this point to get the videos posted within 3 to 4 days after the meeting, so they won't be posted same day or day after, but by the weekend, I think after the knowledge share, we should have them posted. And, you know, if anybody wants to help with that, I wouldn't be opposed. The APRS Foundation, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, myself, John Tarbox, John Langner, Lynn, and Jason Roush are the executive team of the APRS Foundation. It's been slow to start, and we haven't really made the official announcement yet, though we're right on the cusp of making the official announcement to the APRS community. The IRS awarded us 501c3 and 509A2 status, which, and they were also kind enough to make it retroactive back to the starting date of the company, which was March 2022, March 1st, 2022. So we have, you know, full nonprofit and charity status with the IRS, which definitely helps us. I think we're still kind of trying to figure out what our mission is, but I think we've got a pretty good idea at this point. Well, we do need to start having more regular executive team meetings and open that up to the any hams that do want to join us. But I would say probably within the next week or two, there'll be a big announcement coming out on APRS SIG about our foundation, and you know, kind of opening the door to let anybody who wants to be a part of it to come into the fold. I mentioned earlier, so John Tarbox and I have been trying to plan for future knowledge share calls a little bit further in advance rather than a week before. So we've already locked in Dr. Stephen Hamilton, who joined our event this past summer, a few days before the event. So he has some balloon satellite project that makes use of APRS, and he thought that it would be a great topic to present on. So he will be joining us. I think it's January 12th is the second Tuesday in January. So our first meeting of 2024. So you know, it's on the ATGP calendar, and you know, anybody who's any hams that want to join, I would love to have you. And then you know, just kind of open the floor to anybody else who has any sort of updates or anything that they wanted to share with the group. Otherwise, I think we're kind of at the tail end of this.
Question.
Sure.
There was in one of the, I don't remember what it was called, the after action call or whatever it was after last year's event. One of the ideas for this coming year's event was the idea of maybe going sort of in addition to the beacons that are sent back and forth, to also having some sort of messaging, or maybe a way to allow like a hiker to send a message up and down the trail. Has there been any further conversation on that, or is that something that there might be further conversation on?
I think it's a great idea. We should definitely look at incorporating something this year. So, I mean, if you want to kind of flesh out some ideas that you're having there and share them with the group on the groups.io, that would be welcome.
Sure, I can do that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If we do that, that adds additional traffic, which would be awesome. But it should also get out into the APRS FI world because of all the people running iGates, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
With Craig's DigiPi, the web chat, that interface well with that?
Probably so. Yeah, I would think that it would.
Yeah, web chat's kind of like using APRS Droid, only it's a web browser for sending messages, message type packets.
And I think we're pushing for a bunch of iGates this year, correct? Or that
Yeah,
was
the more that we can have, the better. And I mean, it really helps out Lynn, but it also gives people who are not, out on the trail with us the opportunity to follow along with what's going on during the event. And I want to try and raise more awareness with the ham radio community about the event, just in general. And so, I think it would be great to let people know well in advance when we're going to be out on the trail, and that they can follow along with us on aprs.fi.
I use several of Craig's DigiPis locally here, and I've got permission for other locations, so I can actually convert a couple over to the ATGP frequencies for iGates now.
Fantastic.
Yeah, as long as they're receive only, because otherwise we can very quickly dissolve the chain up the trail.
Right.
And where are your packets, where are your stations or your digis located?
I'm in Franklin, North Carolina, 110 on the AT.
Okay, thanks.
That's where my family's from, Franklin. Wow.
How about that? Greg, your project is getting everywhere.
It blew up in my face. That's kind of overwhelming now. Thank you, guys.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
We're getting ready to add a couple more locations up in this area. It's because of the mountains. It's we're kind of isolated, so wherever we can get something. So there's actually a couple more sponsored locations that want to do them. So yeah, absolutely.
John Langer. I've been using your Direwolf for HF, and it's been working wonderful. I've heard a station from Portugal here in Brunswick, and I regularly get DigiPi from a station in Wisconsin, so it's working good.
Great. Glad to hear that.
Yep, you're welcome.
Very cool.
Is anyone here in the call playing around with Vera HF?
I have, yeah, with WinLink.
There's a new move afoot to actually put AX25 APRS packets over Vera HF. They've established a frequency on 20 meters and
14103, according to all the traffic that you got this past 2 days, Lynn.
yeah, and 7.103, whatever band that is. That's 40 meters, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, they're staking out some space, and they're looking to find some standardized frequencies and start pushing AX25 formatted packets inside the Vera modulation scheme for Vera HF.
That's great. Yeah, Vera is a pretty interesting project because in software, for what I think a license for it is $50, you get pretty close to Pactor speeds, which are $1,500 to $2,000 devices.
Now that they lifted the limit, and you'll actually be able to start doing stuff with it on January 7th. It'll be interesting to see how fast it's going to go.
That's right.
Because it's not limited now. It's 2.8 kilohertz, if I remember the right thing. No longer a baud limit.
Yeah, I think everything before that had just been kind of theoretical.
Yeah, except that VARA is limited by the transmit buffer size as well. It doesn't crank up to the higher speeds unless it has a lot hanging out in the transmit buffer. So unless you're, if you're like forwarding messages and stuff, it's just so small it won't speed up. But you have to get like 5 or 10 kbytes in there before it'll speed up.
Oh.
So that's just the FCC region, which is about 6% of the world. Are the rest of the ITU regions on board with the higher symbol rates?
They have been for almost ever.
Okay, so it's just us.
Correct.
Got it.
one less thing to be the laughing stock, technically.
And there's also a because they're limited by bandwidth, and I was reading today that they're putting out to there are, I guess, a couple baud limits on 6 meters, 2 meters, 220, and 440. They're going to look to remove those as well, but they're also taking on whether or not there should be a bandwidth limit, and also on 630 meters and 2200 meters.
Not
I think the
much-
FCC made it clear that you can use whatever symbol rate you want, so long as it fits in 2800 hertz, right?
Yeah, but that's in the HF,
On the
not
HF.
in the LF, which is where 630 and 220,
Oh.
2200 meters are.
Right.
So they're taking comments on doing the same thing down there, and then there's some baud limits on VHF on some of the bands, not on all of them. I think it's just on 6 meters, 2 meters, 220, and 440. There are some limits on there. They're looking to limit, they expect to remove them, but not, they still have to go through the proposal.
Yeah, they're looking for how wide of a bandwidth should they allow. They have some defaults in their proposal. They're looking for comments on those bandwidths.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. I put notes together for 4 different nets, 3 different nets. It's all the same notes, but I put them together, and I try and, one of in the general, or, oh, by the way, if you want to cover this tonight, the like FCC type stuff I put in there.
And I think the biggest bandwidth thing right now that I've seen in the VHF space would be the new packet radio, which we're really limited on bandwidth right now.
John Tarbox, you raised your hand.
Yes, I'm looking at those guitars in the background that Greg has, and I always think of the bumper music.
There's
And
the bumper music.
We
Watch
need
his YouTube channel. He actually plays them as
we need a
intro.
song for the golden packet. Maybe like a bluegrass
Blue
song.
Oyster Cult, Burning for You.
I just throw that out there.
Craig, you missed it. You missed the theme for this year's event was no surprises.
No surprises. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have some Radiohead stuff there I can do. So yeah,
I've done some in the past.
Yeah, I've done. Yeah, I did Karma Police.
Karma Police. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Maybe change the theme of the music all the way up the Appalachian Trail. So have the song change as you go through it.
Nice.
Hey, real quick, you guys are talking about Vara and Packet. I'm not a Vara user just because of the license and it's not open source, but I have been working with John Wiseman on the RDOP protocol. So you really got me thinking about doing some sort of AX.25 through RDOP. Has anyone even thought of that yet?
Well, I think they're sufficiently different ways of doing things that I'm not so sure there's a point for most purposes other than as an experiment. I mean, like the Pactor modem is another good example. Pactor and I think Vera, they each have their own way of bouncing back and forth and taking payload from A to B. Whereas AX25 is kind of like a packet, a whole packet at a time type of thing. And of course, APRS is the ultimate example. It's one frame at a time. So you're basically compartmentalizing it into whatever a Vera frame is, and it's going to do whatever it takes. Now, what it spits out the other side eventually is that string of characters. But I'm not sure if that's like for John, he's going to be thinking about messaging and BPQ mail and things like that. That's the mission.
Yeah,
of
that's
all
his
protocols
emphasis
for him.
Yeah, he doesn't work on RDOP as much as I would like him to work on RDOP. So I'm trying to help in that regard. But yeah, John's the Direwolf, I've been gated through Australia from California. So, I don't know if it definitely gets around the world the way it is now. But I think it'd be interesting to have an open source alternative to Vara when it comes to APRS or Packet.
I guess as we're talking about this a little bit, the other examples like FX.25 and the other one that was mentioned earlier with forward error correcting, the folks that make the Pactor modems, SCS, they created a protocol called Robust packet. And it's kind of takes some of the really good DSP programming and knowledge of propagation from the Pactor world into a very narrow 500 hertz slower thing that really is literally AX25, but with forward error correction. So it operates much like you expect a packet system to work, except that the actual level 0 modem is pretty brutally good at getting the message across. I'd say maybe twice as fast as HF packet by comparison. Which
have they opened that up, or
they have not? They definitely supply free tools to use it on Windows. I'm regularly talking with the guy at SCS about this. This is sort of a sideline project for him. But I mean, as far as performance goes, it's an achievement.
Do you think with
and it also has one for the Teensy microcontroller and other things like that. And I've gotten that to work here and there. But anyway.
Do you think with the removal of the baud limit, there'll be more competition since, you know, he's able to go up above the 300, but, you know, you'll have more people looking to spend time, you know, working for something faster than the dragons and something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're still constrained by the physics of the channel. It's going to be 2.8 kilohertz. So going from P3 to P4 is not quite a doubling, I think. And that's, you know, in more pristine conditions. Things are going to get better. There's an advantage of using single tone systems versus the multi-tone sheet that we've been dealing with all these years. The robust packet is an 8-tone system also, each operating at some really slow baud rate, but aggregate, the speed, of course, is more. So maybe 5,000 bits per second, I think, is what we can practically see. I don't think Vera is going to be able to do a whole lot better than what SCS has done, but they will. I would hope that Vera is working right now earnestly on a single tone approach, because I'm not a professional at this, but the people who do this for a living recognize there's an advantage of using single tone systems versus the multi. A little bit more bandwidth efficiency. So I haven't heard a peep out of Vera about this. They would be silly not to try, because they're poised in perfect position to do something.
Well, doesn't Vera fall back though to single tone? I mean, because I use RDOP, so it goes from FSK to PSK to QAM, you know, depending on band conditions, and it'll degrade
so.
gracefully, right?
It's like Pactor. It starts off with either P1 or P2, real simple, real able to get across slowly, but through the ether to get to the thing set up. And then if the channel looks like it has sufficient quality, it'll start ramping it up to whatever it can handle. And I think Vera does that too. I have not actually played with it enough to know.
It sounds like it does. I listen to it, but I don't actually use it.
Yeah,
so you can fall asleep to it at night.
What was that?
I asked if Craig, if that's what he falls asleep to at night.
But you know what Vara needs is busy channel detection, because I wish RDOP was faster, because I only have about 30 seconds to transfer email before I get stomped by a Vara user. So I don't think Vara has busy channel detection.
I think they just added that to their latest version.
Thank God. Okay.
I think that's
Good.
the user, actually.
Yeah, it's on the user.
Yeah.
The Pactor has a 3-level thing as well, 3 modes. I looked it up just today and answered a question. Of course, it'll recognize its own signals and behave appropriately, but it could also look at simple energies. Like if there's a CW in there, it should notice that it's blocked, and then the software that cares to read that information can act accordingly.
Good.
Vara just does a pop-up that says the channel is busy. Would you still like to transmit? So
Yeah, I'm still doing it.
yeah.
Yeah, I've used both RDOP and VARA up at the Pentagon to check into WinLink and stuff. And yeah, I do know for sure RDOF will give you, hey, the channel's busy. I have not paid attention enough on the VARA to do that, but I do not believe it does. So when I get in there and update the software next week, I'll check and see.
Hey, real quick question for Lynn. Still here?
Yeah, as soon as my mouse can find the unmute button, go ahead.
Hi, Lynn. It's John. I was wondering, I mentioned the microsat earlier, and it has a limitation that you highlighted. But I am setting this up on a digipeater that is within earshot of Station 6 or whatever, the Northern Virginia station, wherever it is. And I'm assuming is in monitor only, it would be fine.
Yeah,
the attribute
very-
that does
very-
what?
Yeah, receive
that.
only eye gates are gorgeous.
All right, perfect.
Then I got to talk with you about setting up. I had, when I was in Pennsylvania, I had that, I'll call it not a cross band, but it would receive on 144.34, but then transmit DigiPi out over to 144.39. And it was transferring, but it was taking the exact packets the way they were coming in from the ATGP. But if they hit an eye gate directly, they'll go into the system, correct? But they
That
won't be
is cor-
DigiPi'd it.
Well, depends what's in the path. If it's transmitting it unmodified and somebody on the trail is doing a wide path, yeah, they'll be digipeated. Or if somebody configures a digipeater on the national frequency to recognize hops, they'll be digipeated.
No, I was just because I'm just curious if it's an eye gate, not a digipeater, and he receives a direct, transmission of, something from GD Hill or from Maryland Mountains or something, but it comes in with just a hop 7.7s, he will gate it, correct? Even though it's, or no? Because I think
Yes,
it was doing it before, but there was an issue where you still wouldn't get notified or something because of how it was set up or something.
Yeah, it will definitely gate it if it's copied. But what you were running into, as I recall, is your digipeater wasn't activating. It was copying packets, but it was not retransmitting them down at your car.
Well, you got something. You said you saw something. Are you? Because you asked me if you were doing it. Anyway, I'll set something up at the house one day and with my AGTP radios and then a digipeater and or not a, well, yeah, and then we'll see if you get them.
Yeah, your split frequency digipeater should do the trick to receive on the event frequency and transmit on 390.
Yeah.
And then if that digipeater's in range of an eye gate, whatever you're transmitting on the event frequency should show up.
Yeah.
On the APRS-IS.
Okay. And
give me a holler sometime, and I'll watch on this end for a test.
Yeah, because it may be something I need to configure so you can see them quicker or so, or pull them out. But anyway, we'll do that testing and sometime in the future, I'd like to chat with Jeff and you about a possible different location for GD Hill that's up higher, and it's literally on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania, and a little bit farther from Maryland Mountains, but a little bit closer to, I think it's Camelback.
Yeah, we'll get the guy that does the radio mobile. Is it?
Yeah.
That does the path analysis? Get him involved in it too.
I did some basic stuff from what I could, looking at the thing, but I mean, it seems to be about the same one of them looked good, the same, one of them looked, anyway, we'll see. The big issue there will be you're on the trail, you're at a really high point, but there's a bunch of trees around you, so that may be the problem.
Yeah, trees like to eat radio energy.
They sure do.
Yes. Well, I'll take a chainsaw.
I think you'd get frowned on with that.
All right, guys, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. We had some folks that already started dropping off, and we're rapidly approaching 9 o'clock. So I think we'll close things down. Thanks so much, everyone. And yeah, we'll meet on groups.io anytime anybody has anything want to share. And hopefully you guys will join us again next month for Dr. Hamilton's presentation, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
Jeff.
Take care.
Have a good night, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.
23. Thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely. My pleasure.